It's lights out on the pit wall. I'm your host, Jeanmark. Welcome to our Fantasy Formula One podcast. Joining me this evening is my bro, Dominick, and my father, Dr. David Kessler. We are your knights in racing armor, and let's begin. Right off the bat, we want to make you aware of an error that is on the Fantasy Formula One website. Let me kick it to the webpage so we can explain it to you in detail. You will see here that Fernando Alonso at the top does not have a race streak, but when you click on him for the Imola GP, it'll say that he finished 10th. You should get a race streak if you finish in the top 10. You will see that somebody who finished in the top 10 at the end of the race but got penalized afterward was Raikkonen. And if you go to the Imola GP, you'll see that it does not include him in the top 10. But yet, if you look at here, it says that he has got a race streak. This impacts the Constructor Alpine, which does not have a race streak, but should, because both Ocon and Alonso finish in the top 10. I have reached out to Fantasy Formula One and hopefully we'll fix it. But if you have Raikkonen on your team, Alonso or Alpine, you want to keep that in mind that there is a potential bug in the system due to the post-race penalty. And while we're speaking of post-race points, let's look at our dynamic pricing for this week. There has not been nearly as much change compared to last race and Bahrain. Our big movers still is Leclerc with a 0.3 million increase, Norris with a 0.2 million increase, and we have a few people that continue to go down, like Vettel, Alonso, and Aston Martin. Bro, what do you think about the dynamic pricing and the prices of these drivers heading into the Portugal Grand Prix?
Well, we actually talked about this quite a bit in our last video. The prices don't look like they've changed too much. And so obviously Leclerc, the last two races were pretty good. Norris has had very good races these last two times, and he ended up on the podium. These are very good looks for these two drivers. So I'm not really surprised to see that we're seeing these kind of movements.
I was trying to do a little day trading, and I found it kind of challenging because it didn't seem to go the way I thought it was going to go. I guess I have more to learn about trends and sentiments.
Well, let's hear more about that. What were you trying to do?
Well, I was trying to get my cap above. I picked some people I thought was going to go up, and they didn't go up. Now I'm kind of stuck with them.
Oh, because you don't want to do more than 3 subs, right?
Right.
Okay, well, speaking of trying to figure out day trading, let me kick it over to the Google Sheet that I've been building. I've been making some grand improvements in the previous few weeks, so I'll give you guys a tour. Our big movers and shakers, Norris costs $13.6 million. He's got a 6.2% value. And to explain value to everyone, I take the percentage of the cost of the 20 drivers, and then you take the percentage of the points, and then that means that he's scoring 6.2% more than he costs. So he should be valued at $30.9 million, and he is a bargain if you can pick him up. But then you have Leclerc. He is at a 2.1% value, and you might say, well, Jeanmark, that doesn't match last week's podcast. That is because I found an error in my algorithm, and that is because people with negative numbers. So I've made it so that everything that balances out. If they're giving you negative points, they're giving you 0% of the points. And so that has adjusted. So now Hamilton, you'll see that he's actually positively rated, whereas before he was negatively rated. But this now brings us to this new tab that I made called Rank. And let me zoom out so you can see. If you want to be able to see the sorted lists of everything that is on the Performance tab, you get to see them from highest to lowest. First, you can see score. Hamilton having the most points. You can see streaks. For example, McLaren, they have a potential to get bonus 15 points this race if they get both a qualifying and a race streak. Cost, you can see who costs the most. And I have in yellow, those that are within 0.2 million of each other, they're in yellow. So you can see who's close. For example, Stroll and Norris, they cost the same, but everybody's going to have Norris instead of Stroll. And then you have a bunch of other people that are really close, like Ferrari and McLaren. Both of them are doing pretty considerable in their points compared to Red Bull and Mercedes. And Ferrari continues to rise rise in price. Then you have your sentiment. If you want to quickly see who is very likely to go up or down in price, you can see at the top, Gasly's above 80%, Verstappen's above 80%, and then Ricciardo, he's been hanging around in the negative 90s for quite some time. You can see the total price change for a driver over the whole season. Leclerc has almost gone up an entire million, whereas Vettel has dropped $1 million. You can see the price picked and whether they're getting more picked or less picked, and then the top 5 of both being traded in and traded out. Then you can see people who have fastest laps, people who are DNFing, because if they're DNFing, they're not going to get you points. And then you have your driver positions and the average amount that they gain or lose in a race. And then we have our teammate battle as far to the right as you can go. Schumacher, for example, is at 100%. He beats his teammate in quali and in the race position. So what do you guys think about being able to see all this information now ranked instead of having to dissect it?
Well, before we really made the changes on the Formula One, I didn't pay much attention to this, but the way you have it organized, it's so much easier for me to look around and figure out trends and help me analyze how I might want to change my team. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Dad.
Yeah, so anything that makes decision making easier is always a welcome change in my book. I hopefully will be able to use this information to make a better team in the following weeks.
And then my third tab is infographics. There's currently only one right now, but what's really nice about this infographic, it shows you the points and then their cost. So let's look right here at the top for all the drivers. You can see that the 2 most expensive drivers are on the left, Hamilton and Verstappen, but then you notice all these middling tier points. And then you get someone who's popped off above the rest, and that's Norris. Do you see how Norris is in the middle as it pertains to cost, but he's the 3rd highest score? That's why practically 60% of all teams have him now, is because he's outperforming everyone else. And then, of course, all those people who score very few points at the bottom, they're giving you negatives, except Schumacher. He's a standout compared to some of the people who cost almost double. Then, if you go down to the constructors, Mercedes, which was dominating everybody going into the last few seasons as it pertains to Fantasy Formula One, is now being outpaced and outperformed by the likes of Red Bull, Ferrari, and McLaren, which is why it makes sense now why so many people are picking Red Bull and McLaren, and roughly 10% pick Ferrari and 10% Mercedes. And that is probably because of the cost Mercedes has, and it's going to keep your team from being able to perform, especially with the amount of points that you're getting. What are your guys' thoughts about these infographics?
I think it's kind of amazing to look at this graphic and see Mercedes, which typically have high points, not that much further than Alpine and
Aston Martin, AlphaTauri, or even Alfa Romeo. They're all seeming to be like only 10 points behind.
Yeah, that really puts things in perspective.
Yeah, being able to visualize it really gives you a new way of looking at things, and it really does give you a lot to think about. Some of the things that you would expect conventionally, a little bit of this shows maybe it's not so obvious anymore.
True. And then this brings us to the last tab that I've added is a results tab. If you're ever wanting to see how the drivers performed at the end of a race, this is your one-stop shop. It shows their position, how much they gained or lost during the race, their final position, who got fastest lap, the top 3 scores of the drivers, top 3 scores of the constructors, and the bottom 3 scores of both drivers and constructors. And the amazing thing is I can adjust it. Boom. Now I get to see race 1. Of course, race 3, they're blank because nobody has raced yet. You can see the link in the description below. Let's go on to our big YouTube comments. Thank you to everybody who has been joining our pit crew here on the Pitwall. One comment was saying they find it interesting that we have a United States perspective. It is true. So I'm glad that people are listening to our perspective, whether you agree with it or disagree with it. Comment in this video. Let us know what you think. What are your thoughts? I think this conversation is for all of us.
Talk to us in the comments about your own perspectives. Give us something to think about and maybe could evolve ourselves.
True.
Yep, that sounds like a good idea.
I made a video actually last week. I was thinking about doing my wild card on my team, and I got some really good feedback on the video. So thank you to everyone on Reddit, r/fantasyf1, for those that comment on the video, being able to not just be the people who help share our cool stuff, but also hear from your guys' cool perspectives. We got a comment that we were going to talk about in our last podcast, but because of the audio stuff that happened, we weren't able to get to it. So let's get to it now. Carlo Duarte says, so you said to pick drivers that will beat their teammates, yet you pick Sonoda. There's the ideal of who you would like to pick, and then there's can you afford them? So I wanted to hear your perspective, Dad, because you didn't have Leclerc, for example, on your team that won the Imola GP race challenge. You had Sainz. Tell us about that pick and your philosophy of picking a teammate who may not get the bonuses of beating their teammate.
I mainly picked the foundation of my team, and then I was looking, okay, what can I supplement? Who could augment my team? And I couldn't afford Leclerc. And so I said, okay, do I pick a team, a person that doesn't score as many points but can beat their teammate, or do I get the person who scores more points at what I can afford? And so I could afford Sainz, but I couldn't afford Leclerc, and he did well for me last race. Came in 5th. He scored just a little behind Leclerc.
And he scored, I think, 23 points or something like that, right? That's a really good if you can get above 20 points. Now, what are your thoughts, bro, about teammate versus how much cost, synergy? Some teams will have both teammates on the same team, just in case to cover that off.
The idea of always picking your teammate who you think will do better is definitely a older mindset from the previous version of the Formula One fantasy. Dynamic pricing has changed the way that you can interact with drivers. And so now there's actually more to think about than just strictly points every week. In this case, yes, it's always good to pick the better driver if the situation is that you have to pick between two people that are on the same team. Always pick what is best for your team first. Then if it comes down to two drivers, then it would probably be in your best interest to pick the one that you would think is better.
And just because you think they're better doesn't mean that they're going to not crash, for example, in that race. There was this huge debate going into Imola. Do you have Gasly? Do you have Tsunoda? Do you have Gasly? Tsunoda? It's probably going to continue for the rest of the season. People are going to spin. People are going to crash. People are going to be on wet tires when everyone else is on the intermediates. Like weird things are going to happen, and then we don't know. And that's the fun of fantasy Formula One and live sports.
If we knew exactly what was going to happen every race, I mean, what would be the point of even watching, really?
Let's go to our big news point that just dropped today. This is the approved unanimously by the teams. There will be 3 races this season where a new qualifying weekend format will be used. At these 3 races, instead of having a practice session Friday and then a second practice session Friday, then a third practice session Saturday morning, then a qualifying Saturday afternoon, then a race Sunday, they're going to have qualifying Friday. Then Saturday, they're going to have practice session 2, which is still under Parc Ferme because of qualifying. That'll be interesting. But then you've got a sprint qualifying. The grid for the sprint qualifying is set by the qualifying, which is what we're used to. You go as fast as you can, fastest lap. With this method, though, they're going to only allow soft tires for that original qualifying. For the sprint qualifying, it'll be 100 kilometers, probably about a third of a race distance. And the finishing order for that will then set the grid for the Grand Prix on Sunday. Of course, if you come in first place for the sprint qualifying, you'll get 3 championship points. Second place, you'll get 2. Third place, you get 1, mainly to sweeten the deal for these teams because their cars are being put at risk for these 3 races. So, bro, what is your thoughts about this qualifying sprint format that they're trying? But I think this might be a preview of what they will try to do in the coming seasons.
Well, first, I'd like to commend them on that they're only doing it for 3 races, like a test trial. There have been a couple of cases in the past where it seems like they were a little bit more hasty and they wanted to make something a little bit more permanent, and then they realized, hey, maybe that isn't such a great idea. So congratulations on actually saying, we'll try this out a couple times and then see if people like it. I will say that it will be definitely exciting to see how these racing changes the strategy and whatever for teams. I'm definitely excited to see how this will possibly change up the way that teams have to strategize each week, assuming that this is something we see more of in the future. I do have one concern, though, and that is we know that the top 3 drivers will get a couple championship points, and we were talking about it will give the teams a little bit more of an incentive to actually take this sprint race seriously. But the question is, for everybody else that's not in the top 3, just because we're trying something different does not change the fact that certain cars are going to be better than others. And so what's the incentive for them to really try super hard? I'm not really sure.
So you're thinking like the top 3 will just zoom away and everyone else will be like, meh.
We're going to get Hamilton. We'll probably get Verstappen, and then maybe Norris or some like a Red Bull or Mercedes, and they're going to get points. But what about our Haas? What about Aston Martin? What's going to make them really try? There's no points to be had if you're going to not be in the top 3. Why push your car and risk anything happening to it?
Well, how I see it is that qualifying lap, they can just go as fast as they want without any traffic to get their qualifying position. This gives their qualifying position in a more race-like atmosphere. So someone's probably not going to qualify and drop so many points like Gasly's done in the past, because now it's more of a race formulation, at least in my thoughts.
So let's put this perspective with the fastest man alive, Usain Bolt. So we have a qualifying for his sprint race. And because he beats everyone in the qualifying, he gets a start 20 feet ahead of everybody. That makes no sense, but that's what happens in racing. You go zoom, fast, and then you get to be in front of everybody. So like you said, why not make qualifying actually a race? And if you happen to win that race, then you can lead the next race. And what I like about this is the unpredictability. There really is no unpredictability in a quali where you just go as fast as possible. The second thing I like is that the reason why they rejected reverse grid qualifying was because they didn't like that you would have to be from behind and it was artificial. But here's the genius that I thought Ross Brawn was trying to get at with this. They have regulations next season that are coming in that are supposed to force you to have cars that follow each other. Currently, Mercedes built a car that goes faster than everybody else and has dirty air so you can't follow behind them. And you have to be 2 seconds faster than a car to really pass them, but you can't because your car overheats behind them. Now, if you were to have a reverse qualifying, you're forcing cars not only to have to race each other, but build cars that can pass people from behind. Now, with this method, even though there's no reverse qualifying, the similar thing is happening, though. You have to build a car that isn't designed to go super fast. You have to build a car that's going to be passing people on track. You might have the fastest car, but if you don't have the best start of the race, you get passed in the first corner anyways. If you compare fastest laps during qualifying to fastest laps during the race is usually like 2 seconds slower than the quali. It just does not make sense that you would have a car that isn't driving like you would an actual race. So I think it would be great for them to do what you said, bro, where you're testing things out. Maybe in future seasons, they'll test things out instead of trying to implement it. They'll test it throughout the season, here, there a little, get used to that because then you get feedback from teams. But also we want things that are helping closer racing, more passing. And for the viewers, maybe you want to go to a practice session where you see them drive around a track, but wouldn't you rather see them race? You know what I mean? Like they're building the weekend for the viewers to have more racing, which means for the sponsors, more exposure because more people are going to tune in to watch a sprint race qualifying than practice session number 3.
People want to see racing, so this is an opportunity to see more racing. And I guess that's good for everybody, really.
As long as people don't crash and then have to repair the car by the start of the next race.
Right. But here's the brilliance of this. You're not going to really crash your car in normal qualifying. And if you do, bad things, but you're more likely to crash your car in an actual race scenario. There are no real stakes in the normal qualifying. When you have an actual race situation, there are stakes because like you said, Dad, you could crash your car. And if you crash your car, you're starting from the back. But not only are you starting from the back, you have to repair your car. And if you can't repair your car in time, you are in trouble. Mercedes, for example, apparently it's going to cost them $1.2 million to repair Bottas's car from the crash with George Russell. Though that's the risk involved. You're racing on the edge. You want to beat a guy because it's going to give you an advantage and you hope that you won't wreck. Which now brings us to an amazing little race that was a sprint race that happened around the streets of Monaco for 8 hours, the Monaco Historique. They take different decades of Formula One cars and they race them in these sprint race exhibitions. Jean Alesi, who was a Ferrari driver, was racing with Niki Lauda's historic championship-winning car from the 70s. And behind him was a German racer who was in a John Player Special Lotus car, which also is a championship racing car. And those two guys were just neck and neck. Actually, Jean Alesi, he qualified second around Monaco, but he had a better start and he stayed in front like corner after lap after lap, and there was no dirty air. These cars were just glued to the hip. So Dad, what were your thoughts seeing that toe-to-toe race around Monaco with those cars that are super small compared to what we were used to today?
Yeah, I thought they were kind of cute cars. I mean, they seemed like short and compact, almost like go-karts of what we drive nowadays. So it's kind of interesting seeing the actual look of the car. But to see that second car right behind where nowadays we don't see that was pretty cool. To see that the car in front actually crashed and there was a little contact, it still happened back then. So it's not just something that happens nowadays.
Bro, I'm seeing you shake your head. How did you feel about that crash, that contact?
You can't talk about a crash of a beautiful car like that so casually, man. That hurts my soul.
You have to think, some person bought that historic car, allowed it to be raced, and now they're going to have to foot the bill. Well, they probably have some sort of insurance to cover that, but like, yikes.
But any repairs is slightly less historic now, right? Slightly more new stuff added to the car to fix it.
Maybe.
Yeah, but the flip side is that now you have a historic crash to go onto its record.
Right. It raced an actual Formula One track. It wasn't like you were driving around your backyard and you messed it up. You were battling for first place around the streets of Monaco. You were going to get an actual trophy handed to you by the Monaco government.
And I did notice that those guys were about my age. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. To see how fast and zippy they could go was really great. If you guys had the chance, how would you feel about racing in one of those historic cars around Monaco? Bro be like, nah, fam. Nah.
Played Codemasters enough to know that it would be first corner and I'm already in the wall.
Yeah, I would actually have to take some classes and lessons before I even want to take a normal car there, more or less one that has such value to it.
Actually, that was something they were talking about. One of the reasons probably why Jean Alesi wasn't able to do as well is because they don't have paddle shifting. You had to actually have a manual shift. And if it slips a gear, you can't get the power out of the corner as quickly as you need because you're trying to hit the clutch and all that. And he wasn't able to get out of the corners as quick as he needed to. I'm glad to have racing like that because we're so used to what Formula One is now. But to have a racetrack that's been there for over 50 years, and a lot of that is almost the exact same layout, that you're able to see the progression. It's really amazing. Let's kick it over to our one race, one team entry challenge for the Portugal Grand Prix. We will put the league code in the description below. You can see it here on screen. Thank you to everyone who's joined. As soon as you get 10 entrants, you're able to update with custom cover and a custom logo. And I'm making a unique one for every race. And so I'm glad you guys are joining in. Here is my team. You could probably see the video that I posted last week about doing a wild card. And so this is very different from the previous race. I like some of the feedback. Red Bull is probably, I'm going to switch with McLaren right before McLaren goes up by 0.1 million since I have 6 subs left. Who do you have for your team? I cannot see it because the race hasn't begun, but who do you have picked for your team going into the Portugal Grand Prix?
Actually, I have exactly the same team that I did last week. I mostly just feel like a lot of my points got destroyed with the Russell Bottas crash because I have Russell on my team. I have Mercedes on my team. I don't know if that would have made a huge difference, but I feel like the points that I got from last week are not necessarily reflecting on what it could have been.
True. And for you, Dad, are you entering the same team that won last race?
So I made a couple changes. After rethinking about that whole thing with Leclerc versus Sainz, I went ahead and brought in Leclerc and released Sainz, and then I released Ocon and picked up Russell. I continued having Gasly, Verstappen, Norris, and Red Bull. But after seeing that graphic that you showed earlier, I'm going to switch out Russell and get Schumacher.
Yeah, Schumacher is really good for his price. The main thing for me is you can only raise your value if it exceeds your current cap. Does that kind of make sense?
That's why I initially put Russell on my team to try to push my cap up.
Yeah.
But before the race starts, Schumacher gives more points thus far than Russell.
I see what you're saying. Did you use a wild card or are you just using your 3 substitutions?
I just used 2 substitutions so far.
You have 1 left? Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. The top 3 performers in our race will get a podium presentation at the end of the race reaction podcast, and we will play the national anthem of the winner. And so I'm looking forward to it. It was a really great idea. I think it went over pretty well, and I'm excited for all of you who are playing with us. It's a lot of fun. Before we close out this section and go to our League DRD picks, how did you feel, Dad, about being on the top of the rostrum last race?
It felt so good to actually see the flag and hear the national anthem. I've watched a lot of Formula One racing, and I haven't seen that or heard that for a while. So it was great, and it'd be nice to hear it again in the future sometime.
Well, the competition's tough. This might be your one and only race win of the season. At least you
I'll
can
take
say
it.
you had it.
I can take it.
Which now brings us to our league DRD scores. This is where for our battle race, this is our 3 races before the season begins. We pick 3 drivers. They will be put into 3 slots. Those slots go head to head, and we can turbo one of our 3 drivers. And we can see here in the first slot, Sainz being turboed ended up beating Alonso and Gasly. In the second slot, I turboed Leclerc and beat out Norris and Vettel with his solitary point. And in the third slot, there were no turbos, and I had Ricciardo, who barely edged out Stroll by 1 point. And of course, Tsunoda came in last. It's interesting, bro, with the 3 drivers, had 72 points, but did not get a single battle race point. How do you feel about that, bro?
It's rough, really. Basically, any different combination of turbos could have changed. I could have probably gotten at least 1 point if a single turbo had been changed, and I just did not get that.
This is our last battle race before the beginning of the season. Bro has 0 battle race points. Dad and I are tied with 3. Dominick has to get a clean sweep to tie things up, and this is now where we get to pick our drivers to see if that can be a reality. If not, it'll be down to Dad and me. And the main thing is the person with the most battle race points will be able to pick their drafting position heading into the regular season. So, bro, you get to pick first. Who is your driver? Actually, for those of you that are watching, what we are participating in is a driver rotational draft system. It doesn't have anything to do with money or salary cap space. So when you pick a driver, they have an eligibility. You'll see as we go how it works specifically. The main names on the left, and then you look at the top, and there will be names underneath. Bro, who are you going to pick as your first driver for the last battle race?
Oh, man. So I have so many options, and it's really hard to pretend that I haven't already done this once, but we're gonna. So just in case you're still here with us, we actually did this a week ago, and the sound was not recorded at all, and that's why we had to redo last week's podcast. So we're actually redoing this as well.
The good news is I can't remember what I picked last time.
The good news is I deleted all the information before you could see it. So I did pick Leclerc first last time, and I'm going to go ahead and make that same mistake a second time.
Nah, he's a solid option.
Yeah, but remember, now I have like 2 options on the bottom.
Ah, yeah. Dad, who are you going to pick?
That's it. That is a challenge. Well, I guess I'm going to go with Norris.
Why not?
Why not? He's dependable.
All right, bruh. What you doing?
What am I going to pick?
You get 2 picks in a row.
Yep, I'll pick up Sainz.
How are you gonna just do that to me, man? Sainz first?
Yep, and then that'll leave...
He's your enemy, not me!
Under Sainz, yeah, Schumacher, Mazepin, Russell, and Latifi. I'll pick Schumacher.
That was almost a combination I did. I almost picked Sainz so I could get Schumacher.
Yeah, because if you look at it, Mazepin, Russell, Latifi, and Schumacher all had the exact same options, so... might as well pick the best of those options.
He has all of, what is it, 2 options?
Choices. Yeah.
And I now will have all of one choice once you're done?
No, you will have Mazepin. You'll have 2 options.
All of one options?
Okay, so is it my turn?
Mm-hmm.
I will pick Russell and hope that he actually doesn't crash again.
And then, bro.
Is it sad that Latifi is probably the better option here? I'm going to go with Latifi. Let's see what I will do with my third.
Yeah, now you can pick anyone. So that's great.
You know, I'm going to go with Gasly as my third.
Yep.
Yeah, so those sounds are music to my ear. Now you guys have to figure out what you're going to do.
Well, I'll go with Stroll.
Really?
Yep.
Is it because you guys can't pick up Ricciardo? Am I missing something here?
I could pick up Ricciardo, but the thing is, somebody already picked up Norris.
Okay, well, I'll pick up Ricciardo then. I think I actually have a better draft than I did last time.
See, that's why I picked Stroll, so it looked nice and
sandwich.
symmetrical like that.
Sandwich.
Sandwich. Okay, so now it's time for us to put in our slots. Bro, who's going to be in slot number 1? Leclerc, Latifi, or Gasly?
Definitely Latifi.
Okay, Dad can pick Norris, Russell, or Stroll.
I'll pick Stroll.
Who do I think is going to beat Latifi? Nope, I think it's going to be Schumacher.
I didn't realize that Ricardo actually scored 34 points and Stroll's only 29. That's interesting.
You've got Russell or Norris?
I'll put Norris there.
Ooh. Well, I can't put Ricardo because I don't think you'll beat him. So I have to put Sainz then.
This is rough because both of my options, I might have to go with Leclerc, actually.
That will leave
How nice of you to tell us who you're turboing.
Ricardo
Yeah, that's what.
and
Russell.
Gasly and Russell. Huh. See, I think Sainz cannot beat Leclerc and Norris on his own. Ricardo should be able to beat those other two guys unless Gasly has a really strong race. But then the question is, who are you going to turbo?
Give you a hint. I'm not turboing Russell, just to let you know.
50-50.
But that could all be a ruse.
Would you turbo Russell if you had him?
Depends. Is this a ruse?
3, 2, 1.
Wow.
See, I felt that if I turboed Sainz, I was going to get turboed by Leclerc or Norris. So I'm glad I avoided that and bailed. Went on Schumacher. And wow, each of us got our own slot. This is going to be spicy. Schumacher is getting turboed, and Gasly's getting turboed, and Norris is getting turboed. Norris might be overkill, though, because he would beat both of those guys without a turbo. But you never know what would happen.
Yeah, but
right?
I didn't know if you guys were going to turbo Sainz and Leclerc. So
see, that's the strategy.
I had to turbo him just in case you guys turboed. And you guys didn't, which is good for you guys.
But maybe that'll ensure a victory for you.
Maybe. Still, my probabilities with Stroll, even though Schumacher's turboed.
So that's the thing. I thought that the only way to really beat Stroll with Schumacher would be to turbo him. And like you said, that may not even be enough. But it's at least worth trying.
Yep.
Because I figured if I turboed Sainz, I was going to get out turboed. And I figured that Ricardo was an option to turbo. But I think he would beat both Russell and Gasly unless Gasly got turboed. And that's what Bro ended up doing. So it's going to be a toss-up. Right?
Since it's you and I more, it was smarter for you to do Schumacher to try to take 1 point away from me on Strolls versus turboing.
I didn't even think about
Ricardo.
that. That's big brain. That's true. Because if I thought Schumacher was going to beat Latifi, then I have to see if I could beat your guy.
Right.
Because I think Ricardo will beat Russell for sure. Sainz probably won't be able to beat Norris, but since you turboed him anyways, I could potentially draw even by having Schumacher beat Stroll. What are your thoughts, bro? Your strategy?
I'm just here for the ride. See what happens.
Well, there you have it. Thank you for joining us. I've been your host, Jeanmark, and thank you, Bro, for joining us. And Dad for joining us as well.
My pleasure.
We are your knights in racing armor, and we'll see you next time on the pit wall.